Hey everyone, Phobos here, and coming at you with an updated build guide, and this time it's for the Freezing Pulse Totem Inquisitor. And if you've been following the channel, you've probably seen other guides for this build. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post the changes from 2.5 to 2.6, because this character is on 2.6 for Legacy League. And I'll start with those changes, and that way if you just want to know the changes because you already know the core of the build and stuff like that, then you can just watch like the first 5 minutes of this video. I'll go over the changes and you'll be golden. And then if you're a new player or something, or you just haven't seen the build before and you want to see the entire thing, you can just keep watching, and it'll probably be about like a 12-15 minute video hopefully. So to start with the changes, basically we'll go with the changes on the tree first. So the most obvious thing, I guess, is the first snow jewels that they just added in 2.6. Now, you're basically replacing, what is that jewel? The other projectile one? Rain of Splinters, yeah. So you're replacing a Rain of Splinters with these, and you can actually use two first snows to get a GMP on your totem. Now, it's not like as effective as you'd think it would be because that AI targeting is like weird, because like normally if you had the GMP, you could choose like how to spread the projectiles by virtue of where you're targeting. But in this case, since the AI is doing it, it's always kind of like a little bit wonky. So you don't necessarily have to use two jewels, but I don't really have like a GG jewel or anything to replace this with. And if you don't really have a GG jewel, you should probably just use two first snows. But if you have like three really good jewels that you want to use, knock yourself out and just remove one of these, and the LMP is probably going to be fine. So it's just something you can like play around with. In terms of other changes, main thing is inspiration right here, this cluster behind Mind Over Matter. So I don't think we actually take Mind Over Matter on the previous version of this, but it's definitely worth taking here because these nodes just give you a ton of mana. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's just pretty awesome. And I didn't really want to run like a blasphemy or anything with this because it's the radius reductions kind of really hurt blasphemy, I feel like. So could have run like a blasphemy assassin's mark or something like that, and you can do that if you want, but I just prefer to have the Mind Over Matter pool. It's really good for chaos damage, and we don't have like that much energy shield, so even though there's not really a synergy with ES, our ES will get broken when we take a huge hit, and it will dip into our health, and having the mana there is actually really nice to bail us out a little bit. We have quite a bit of effective health when you combine the 5k health with like the 2300 ES, and then the all this mana. We have like close to 1350 mana now, like, and the ES actually goes up too because I have like really shitty rares on for terms of ES. So yeah. But so that's the changes to the tree, and then the itemization changes. I basically want to talk about the neck. Now, as you can see, I have a very good rare neck here, but what you should probably be striving for if you're going for a budget option is a cow reward, and that's the unique neck that gives like 30 dex and the prod speed and stuff like that, and they just updated it to give prod damage as well. So that makes it like a really viable neck because it was kind of hard to justify before with just the prod speed and the movement speed, even though the movement speed is really nice, obviously. But now we have prod speed, movement speed, and prod damage. So it's just a really solid neck, and it has a 30 dex base, which is really important because it's probably going to save you a point if you're able to get the 30 dex in the neck or somewhere close to the 30 dex like I have here. It's not better than like a pretty good rare neck like this, but it's definitely a great starter. And if you're using like shield charge with a dagger or a scepter or something in a shield, then the upgraded version of that neck also gives attack speed. So that definitely never hurts. Yeah, so it's just a really solid neck. And you can also just spam corrupt them if you want to get whatever corruption you want. If you want like a +1 curse or something, and you want a dual curse, yeah, so definitely a really solid option there. And then the other change was the Brine Rot flag. So before we were using the shield where you put the trap gems in it and you basically spam traps and they generated power charges because you had a chance to generate a power charge on like trap throw or something like that, each individual one. And that is really good, but this shield is just more consistent because whenever you use a war cry, you get 2 power charges, which means that you will always refresh the stack, and it's always going to be super consistent. The trap shield is a lot better when you start the map for just getting to max charges like right at the start, but you don't really need to do that anyways, because more often than not you can just walk into a pack and throw down Orb of Storms, and you'll go up to full charges, and then you can just maintain the charges using the weapon swap and the rallying cry. And then we use the Storm Prism here so that when we do maintain the charges, we only lose 1 charge. So we go down to like 8 charges. And I mean, for clearing trash and shit, you really don't need 9 charges anyway, but I mean, you can always just Orb of Storms again and go back to 9, then you have like pretty much like another 20 seconds or so, or 18 seconds before you have to worry about charges again. So it's a really good method for dealing with charges, and basically the idea is that if you're in an unsafe situation, you can always maintain most of your stack, pretty much just -1 by using the rallying cry. You don't even have to hit anything really, so you can just use the ability and you get the charges, so it's really great. And if you can hit stuff though, rallying cry is great because it gives extra mana regen and extra damage. So yeah, basically just love this new shield, and I would definitely recommend picking one up. And those are pretty much the main changes. So if you've already seen the old guide and you're just looking for updates that I made, then that's pretty much it. And if you're new, I guess we'll get on to the next part of the guide. So what is this build? So basically, it's a build that was made to try and freeze everything in the game that could be frozen, at least in most circumstances. If you put like a really ridiculous map with like, I guess, reduced crits and enfeeble or something, and it's like one of those really annoying warband boss or something, then maybe you'll have some issues. But this can pretty much freeze everything, especially when it's geared out. And we can go right into the gems right now. So we're using a minion totem elemental resistance, freezing pulse, faster casting, controlled destruction, crit multi, crit strikes, and that's our 6th link. Now this is in a soul mantle, so we basically have the implicit spell totem, so we don't need to have the spell totem gem. Now you're gonna look at this gear, and it's seemingly pretty good gear, right? Because there's 2 voids and a soul mantle. Now that's 6 linked. Now keep in mind though, I played this character up to I think like 92 or something, or 93, with 2 rare wands and a 5-link soul mantle. And a 5-link soul mantle is very easy to get, especially because at this point in the league the price has like just crashed to nothing. So you can pick one up for very cheap, and you can pick up really good wands really cheap, because I'm having trouble selling wands right now that are actually pretty good, so I imagine the prices have just plummeted. And even the price of void batteries has plummeted. That's what I actually did with this build, in the sense of I waited for the voids to plummet, because I think in like the first week, like early in the first week, voids are like 180 or something. Then they were like 150, then they were like 100, and I picked these up for basically like 60 chaos a piece or something like that. So yeah, I just like waited a while because I knew they were gonna crash, and I didn't want to spend all that money when the build would perform fine without them. So yeah, same thing goes with the 6-link soul mantle. Having the 6-link is not a huge deal. I actually use what is it? Minion totem elemental resistance. Now you can use an empower on here, and if you could somehow get a +1 on your chest and had like a level 4 empower, that would be a lot better than minion totem elemental resistance. Added cold is better in terms of damage, but this gives a lot of utility in the sense that if your mobs hit a reflect, if your totems hit a reflect mob, they basically kind of end up surviving, I would say, like an extra round, or they survive a lot better than you think they would, because you have the 20 spell totem with the 50% increased totem life. You have a little bit of totem life from the tree, and then on top of that, you have pretty much capped totem resist, because now they have like 30 some base resist. So you're easily capped on resist with minion totem elemental damage. So they can actually take hits from reflect fairly well. Now I still wouldn't recommend doing reflect maps, because it's just super annoying. And the problem is you're hitting such a large volume of things with your spread on the freezing pulse that your totems are probably going to die anyways. But against like a single reflect mob, minion totem elemental resist really helps out a lot, and makes things much more manageable, I'd say. especially because in this league like, you're going to be encountering Beyond and stuff like that, and Beyond will sometimes just spawn with Ellie Reflect for no reason, so that's pretty helpful. But yeah, you can always just add Cold if you want more damage. It's not that much more, but in power level 3 I think is more than this for sure, but it's not. When I simmed it, it was more, but it's not a ton more. And maybe eventually I want to upgrade this to a 4 in power, but again, probably only if I get a +1 chest. Now, another thing you can do, if you don't think you're ever going to be able to get a 6 link for whatever reason, is you can run a 5 link, and because they're so cheap, like getting 5 links, what you can do is you get a 5 link, right? And then you buy 6 sockets, and you try and 6 link the 6 sockets. But if you get a 5 link, you'd normally resell the 5 link, right? If you wanted to do it the slow method, so you don't absolutely break your bank. Now the problem is reselling a 5 link soul mantle is not going to be very easy, as it was pretty hard to do even when I was trying to do it. I only was able to sell like 4 or 5 of them before the price kind of just crashed, and now it's kind of like really hard because the 5 link is almost worth the same as like a 6 socket, and it's kind of ridiculous. So what you can do is if nobody is buying them, you can vol them once they're 5 linked and try and hit like +1 to gems or something, and that'll be really nice, a nice damage boost, and it'll be somewhat comparable to having a 6 link without a +1. So that's something you can do for like a budget option if you don't think you'll ever be able to get this. But I picked this up for like 150 chaos, I think. So it's not really that expensive. It's expensive, but for like a unique 6 link, it's pretty cheap, I would say. So yeah. Other uniques I use, I obviously went over the voids, but like I said, you can use rare wands, like 5 chaos wands, it'll work just fine. I use Winds of Change. Now this is nice because it got changed. The movement speed got reduced, or the movement speed penalty got reduced, so I actually got a fairly good pair for a couple chaos. I was really happy about that. For the boots, you just use ES boots. Now, if you can, you want to get the lab enchant. I like self-crafted these with the movement speed essences, and these are far from ideal, but basically I hit this in like 2 essences, so I was just like, I'm gonna call it a day at this point and not waste a ton of currency. So I just crafted life on there, and I got the shit roll, but it's whatever, because it's pretty much good enough for now. I had the resist that I wanted, so that was kind of actually lucky, and that's why I basically kept them. Like I said earlier, you could use the carry ward on a budget option. I think I was using that up until 92, so very budget friendly. My rings, they look kind of nice, but they're really just resist rings, right? And now this stuff is going to be even cheaper than it was back in the day. I actually think I regaled the lightning res on this, and then crafted the cold, so it was kind of lucky I didn't really buy it. And then this was, I actually picked this up for I think like under 5 chaos or something. And it's pretty good, and it basically just gives me the decks I need to not have to take the point from the tree. So these should definitely be upgraded, but they're fine, like budget rings. My neck is pretty good for sure. This was like 15 chaos, and my helm was pretty cheap. I forget exactly how much I paid. I think it was like 10 chaos for the enchant, and then I just I threw like an alch in there or something. You should probably try and craft it with the life essence or whatever, but I ran out of those and I threw an alch in, and I got this, so I decided to just keep it. But ideally, the energy shield would be at least in the 200 range. If this was in the 200 range and this was in like the 1 something range, like 120 or something like that, you have a lot more energy shield. You'd probably have like 2600 ES. So yeah, the build can definitely get even tankier than it is right now, and most of my gear is mediocre aside from the chest and the wands. So the belts, basically just standard. You really want flask duration on the belt. I actually don't have it here because I just haven't looked for a belt in a while, but yeah, it's definitely something nice if you can pick it up. And speaking of flask duration, we should probably talk about why that's important and what flask we're going to use to mitigate the effect of the soul mantle, right? So as you can see with the soul mantle, when a totem dies, you get a curse, right? And this isn't just when the totem dies, it's when you replace the totem as well. So you can stack up curses on yourself pretty fast, as you can see. And how do we mitigate this? Well, we just use warding flasks. Now, the most optimal way to do this is probably to have a warding sulfur flask. Now, there's some options you can do. You can do the chemists, right? and if you can get it down to 15, consumes 15 charges, then you get 4 uses out of it. So that's good. I actually prefer just having the duration though, because you're gonna get charges back so fast anyways, and it's more a matter of me of like not having to micromanage the flask as much, right? So like having a longer duration with duration on the belt is just something I prefer. But I've spent like a retarded amount of alts and I cannot get that, so I've just settled for this, and it's not really a problem at all. Because I don't have the exact setup I want, I have more warding flasks than I really should. So this basalt should have chemists on it, ideally, and that'll give you basically 2 charges of it. But right now we only have 1, and this has warding on it right now. And my Quicksilver has warding, as well as increased duration. Now your Quicksilver realistically should probably just be a move speed Quicksilver instead of a warding one. But like I said, because I don't have the optimal setup here and I wasn't like super comfortable, I just threw in a warding Quicksilver, and I've been using that. But you can just replace that with a speed flask for sure. Um, it's nice to have one of these on hand for some fights. So if you're planning on doing like Guardians or something, which I really wouldn't recommend with this build, because you can't freeze them, so you lose like a lot of your survivability essentially, because you have like decent effective health, but it's like nowhere near something that a CI build would have. And while a lot of the mechanics are one shot, there are also a ton of mechanics that aren't one shot, and it's just nice to have like 12k ES to fight those mechanics as opposed to essentially like effectively around 8k or so total life. So I wouldn't recommend doing Guardians with this. It's more just like a mapping build, but you can if you want, and if you do, I would definitely recommend warding on everything, because you're going to have to space out your warding flask uses basically, because you're not going to do insane damage. Like the tooltip on this build, and this is without the Uber obviously, so with the Uber it's going to be like around, I think on the sim against Guardians, it's around like 200k per totem, maybe a little bit more. And then you have 3 totems, so it's 600k. And they're actually pretty tanky, so it's not going to be the situation like with most totem builds where they die like super quick. So the effective damage there is still going to be reasonably good, but they will die and stuff like that from time to time. So you're basically going to be in there for a bit, and you're going to have to manage your flasks, and you may have to use some portals to refill them and stuff like that. And it's just nice having a third warding if you're going to be doing prolonged fights like that. In a non-Guardian scenario, this build pretty much just destroys any other boss. So you don't really have to worry about like, oh no, I have to manage my flask super well or anything. No. You just pretty much walk up to the boss and annihilate them. So yeah, that's pretty much that. And yeah, we can open the tree here one more time, just give you a little look. And then I don't think I talked about the Ascendancy yet, but basically, uh, if you want to go fast, you go Instruments of Virtue. If you want to have higher freezing potential, take this. And you're only going to go fast with this if you use a different setup. You need to use like a something with Shield Charge or Whirling Blades, or you have a Scepter, or using daggers with a shield or something like that, and that's perfectly viable with this build. You're just going to lose some damage for sure, but like I said, you don't need the damage from the dual voids, so it's perfectly viable to have that setup. And the main part of the Ascendancy is the Inevitable Judgment, because this means when you crit, all the resistance of the mob go away, and that's how we pretty much freeze things without having to use pen. And it's more reliable against really strong monsters because they have curse resistance. I think in terms of the Guardians, it's like 80% or something. So getting them below 0 with just pen is actually kind of hard, which means that this is going to be a better option for DPS in a lot of circumstances. So Inevitable Judgment, super good. That's pretty much what you get first. And yeah, I think we have like 91% crit when the lab enchant is up, which means that you don't want to spam Orb of Storms unnecessarily, because you basically lose DPS, because then you crit and you lose the lab enchant. But you can easily hit crit cap if I had crit on a ring or something, or a neck, and if I did hit crit cap, I wouldn't use Assassin's Mark. I'd use probably Proj Weakness or something like that. So that's pretty much that. And in terms of like leveling the build and stuff, I leveled as Flame Blast. What you can do if you want is level as Flame Blast and take Instruments of Virtue and use the shield combo. I did this until like I think 75, and then I just respect out of it and got Inevitable Judgment and picked up this node right here. You don't even have to really respect out of it because you don't need this node. You can keep this and then get Inevitable Judgment as well. But it kind of just depends on like when you want to do Merciless Azaro and if you think you have the damage without it. So it's kind of just up to you at that point, but yeah. So that's pretty much the build. Oh yeah, use a Fall Lightning Trap, obviously, just to shock things that can be shocked. Use a Flame Dash just to move around. You can also use a Lightning Warp. It's probably better than Flame Dash, honestly, in most cases. And this is to generate the power charges. And if you, when you take the Ascendancy for this right here, the next Ascendancy node, you can just run like a Frenzy, GMP, faster attacks or chain or something like that. And the idea is that you're mostly just proccing the cast speed or whatever, but you will get some frenzy charges from it as well. Like the idea isn't to super sustain them; it's more just to proc the cast speed from the Ascendancy. Or if you're using the shield charge method, then you don't have to worry about that at all. It's always going to be procced all the time. So it pretty much just depends on what you want to do. So there's a lot of flexibility there, but yeah, just really fun build. Pretty safe, freezes everything. So yep. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, just leave them down below and I'll respond. Thank you.